The expansive world of Azeroth introduced in Classic WoW is one of the most formidable accomplishments in MMO and gaming history. 2 massive continents, 40 zones worth of content with minimal loading screens, and all types of geography to explore. Each new journey you embark on in Classic takes you far and wide across the great expanses and into the grim caverns of the world, but sometimes you might run into a roadblock. What lies beyond the Greymane Wall in secluded Gilneas? What's going on with the surviving elves of Quel'Thalas? And literally above all else, what lies atop Mount Hyjal, the pinnacle of northern Kalimdor and the highest point in the entire game? And how do we even get up there? Long before the Cataclysm reshaped and unlocked much of the old world and its mystery zones, these were legitimate questions for vanilla players just starting out in this new land. Today, I want to take a look at the unfinished ascent to Mount Hyjal, examining the digital clues that slowly but steadily guide us toward the summit, only to withhold the big reveal from all but the most stubborn adventurers. There's a lot to unpack today, and I hope you'll gain a new appreciation for both the narrative and a geographic climb that spans multiple zones and level brackets. As always, thank you for the fun comments and support, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. Northern Kalimdor is fundamentally the domain of the Night Elves, a wise and reclusive people who shepherd the natural order of the world, and have only recently returned to participating on the world stage. 10,000 Warcraft years ago, reckless use of arcane magic led to the Highborn Zealots summoning the Burning Legion to Azeroth, ending with the Great Sundering that ripped the world apart into separate continents. Remnants of the old empire still linger in every one of these zones, and in the millennia since, the elves have reconstituted their society around nature and druidic practices rather than the arcane. The world tree Nordrassil grown atop Mount Hyjal, serving as the key conduit of this verdant realm. More recently though, the Legion's return during the Reign of Chaos heralded a second conflict with the elves and their new mortal allies, culminating in the defeat of the demons on the summit of Hyjal, but at great cost. Nordrassil was severely damaged, and many of the mountain's idyllic slopes were scorched by demon fire, desecrating one of the most primal realms of nature. 4 in-game years later, the adventures of Vanilla WoW unfold, some of which take place in areas of Kalimdor we saw during Warcraft 3, like the forests of Ashenvale, and the distinct regions of Felwood and Moonglade. But excluded from this list was Mount Hyjal itself, the zone where the big finale unfolded not too long ago. The in-game maps of neighboring zones label Hyjal in their margins, but there's no way of zooming in and seeing what might be hidden within. When I was a kid, I was intrigued by this zone, one so central and heavily emphasized on these maps, yet one that defied any attempt at discovery. As I began to amass Classic WoW guidebooks and learn more about the lore, I imagined what might be left up here. A barren wasteland ruined by the Legion, similar to areas like the Tainted Scar or Felwood, a scorched tree trunk serving as a reminder of an apocalyptic war. For players jumping to WoW right on the heels of finishing Warcraft 3, I imagine many may have felt similarly, eager for answers, eager to uncover the next chapter of this pivotal zone. And to do that, we're going to have to take a trip up the mountain, stopping to examine a few hints and clues along the way. Let's start at elevation 0, sea level. You can keep track of our current elevation using the data at the bottom of the screen. Darkshore is a coastal zone that wraps around the northwestern edge of the continent, beckoning Night Elven players arriving from Teldrassil with its mysterious ruins and long-lost history. Night Elves are told the history of Nordrassil and Mount Hyjal as they progress through their starting zone, and while there isn't much to add here in this zone, there is a reference to the Third War that took place higher up and away from this stormy coast, beyond steep cliff walls that make up the outer margin of the Hyjal mountain range. Players can stumble across a mysterious red crystal in the foothills containing a shattered jawbone, which I explained in a video from a while back. Long story short, this is likely the bottom portion of the Skull of Gul'dan and its pedestal, which were once used to corrupt the ancient forests that are now known as Felwood. The crystal was cast down here at some point, and while many players may have overlooked this detail then and now, it gives us our first interzone link that spatially emphasizes how these regions are connected, or perhaps divided from one another. To the south, the dark woodlands of Ashenvale slope upward away from the coast, though the Zoram Strand in the west offers a unique flavor of shoreline for adventurers facing the Naga. There are no quests or direct references that relate to Mount Hyjal, but this zone is important in that it marks the true start of the ascent toward the Great Summit. North of Rainwood Retreat, the road takes on a much more noticeable incline as you pass into the sickly vales of Felwood, withered by demonic power and poisoned water sources. You may venture here seeking the aid of the druids at the Emerald Sanctuary, or some other purpose, but it's unlikely you'll arrive before level 45, as this marks the beginning of a series of high-level zones. Mirroring Darkshore far below, Felwood curves around the western side of Mount Hyjal, and this is the first zone where the in-game map shows us the name of the Forbidden Summit, confirming our destination at the very heart of this landmass. Sickly green rivers flow through the land, making you wonder what terrible sources might be afflicting the water from even higher up in elevation. The overrun barrow dens of Jediwarlock in the central part of the zone have one detail I want to re-emphasize from a video a few weeks back. At the very bottom of the Shadowhold, next to the Demon Lord Banehollow, is a convoluted mass of thorny roots. While these could be the corrupted roots of Felwood trees above, or maybe a new byproduct of the demonic influence in the area, my favorite theory is that these are some of the outer roots of Nordrassil. We know the World Tree sustained the life force of the Elven realm, allowing nature to permeate the land to a degree rarely seen elsewhere on Azeroth. While this potential example here once extended into a den of druidic magic, the roots may now feed on tainted energy from the cultists and their activities. Back at the surface, there are small camps of both the Horde and Alliance to find in the northern region of this zone, though the Horde's base at Bloodvenom Post is undoubtedly the cooler of the two. A perfect view out of this cursed valley and toward the Veiled Sea, and a series of waterfalls cascade down from here into Darkshore's Wildbend River. If you're brave enough to jump, you'll see the corrupted flow slowly turn clear as most of the thick fell poison recedes from pool to pool. Moving onward and upward, the land continues to deteriorate, smoldering impact craters from the recent war, along with dens of satyr and corrupted furbolg. At the northern reach of this zone sits one entrance to Timbermaw Hold, the last stronghold of uncorrupted furbolg on Kalimdor. This sizable tunnel system offers passage to both Winterspring in the east and Moonglade to the north, and there's even a blocked-off tunnel to an unknown destination that I'd love to speculate on sometime. Before you traverse through, though, you'll quickly realize the Timbermaw are hostile to your intrusion, and you'll need to prove yourself as an ally if you're to continue on your path toward Hyjal. This is the first, and really only, point in classic WoW where the game's reputation system stops you and forces you to take a detour before accessing a chunk of the game. While you might have checked out the reputation menu before now, your standings with various factions haven't been that relevant besides unlocking a vendor discount or PvP item. It's an interesting way to reintroduce this game mechanic to players of all types, and also gives you insight into the struggles of those who don't align themselves with the Horde or the Alliance. There are two neutral NPCs, located in the north and south of Felwood, who offer quests to improve your standing with the Timbermaw, and after helping them eliminate their corrupted rivals during a short grind, you'll move from hostile to unfriendly, and you can continue on your way. Moonglade is the sacred valley of the Cenarian Druids, tucked away on the northern slopes of this vast mountain system. There's not much to do here, but you may end up visiting a time or two as you approach level 60 and begin dealing with the threats of the Silithid or the powers of the Emerald Nightmare. Druids level 10 and above can use a teleport spell to get here, and have access to druid-specific flight paths to get back home. If you're not a druid, don't worry, you can still find faction-specific flight paths in the southern part of the zone near the tunnel exit. Back in Timbermaw Hold, if you instead take the eastern tunnel, you'll arrive in the frosty expanse of Winterspring. This zone appears nearly frozen in time, with elven ruins dotting the landscape, and the land hosting a variety of primal life forms, including frost sabers, owlkin, and chimera, all adapted to this icy climate. There are many ancient secrets to unearth here, but there's also a bit of recent history to contend with. Donovan Snowden, a dwarven researcher who has come here to investigate the zone's anomalies, is camped near the tunnel entrance, near one of the new hot springs that have emerged in recent years. She's a major quest giver while you're leveling in this zone, especially regarding the Winterfall Furbolg and their corruption, but she also has a short quest line involving these hot springs, which we'll talk about later. Winterspring is the second region that refers to Hyjal on the in-game map, but as you make your way eastward, there's another reference to what lies above embedded within the southern slopes. Colossal roots can be found along a major chunk of the mountainside, a definite example of Nordrossil's roots and their great reach within the continent. For those skeptical, perhaps thinking these belong to the local trees, the asset names are listed as World Tree Roots 01 through 04, which gives us a definite connection to Mount Hyjal and the great tree that sits above. It's a cool detail that many players probably overlook, and their close proximity to the ruined elven city of Kelthoril and the blue dragon cave of Mazthoril further promote this theme of magic and the arcane on the border of this secluded zone. Continuing east and still climbing in elevation, you'll eventually find the goblin outpost of Everlook established in a central clearing, a small hub of civilization in an otherwise rather lonely zone. While many of the quests in Winterspring originate from here and send you to various points of interest on the map, there are very few that send you to the far south. Here lies Frostwhisper Gorge, where aggressive ice giants roam between frozen ruins. While collecting Frostmaw shards or battling the giants, you might find the remains of an explorer who fell from the icy span above, but what stands out to me even more is the sunken elven tower on the southern side, which has a wrought iron door for some reason. To my knowledge, no other Highborn tower has something like this except the one at Nigel's Point in Desolace, and while neither of the doors lead anywhere, it's interesting to think about the interior models that could have been included within these ruins. Beyond Frostwhisper lies a small, dying forest that has its own fair share of interesting details, and you can check it out in my In-Betweens of Azeroth video. But the most dangerous and isolated place in Winterspring is yet to come. Darkwhisper Gorge is the one part of this zone without snow and ice. The volcanic vents and evil haze seen here have warmed this area to an unnatural degree. Demons of the Hedorine clan, led by the rare boss Lady Hedorine, call this area home, powerful elites that make passing through here very dangerous. But there are a few reasons high-level players might venture here. As mentioned earlier, Dawn of a Snowden has you investigate this area briefly to find proof of demonic meddling with the land, and the small cinder vents we find do link this area geologically with the hot springs in the west, though the quest line ends before we find any more information. Cautiously entering the gorge, you'll encounter a twisting labyrinth of small canyons connected by tunnels, all crawling with demons. Players on the Lord Valthalak questline might visit the imp Vi-El to pick up a Fel elemental rod, and warlocks and priests might travel here to loot Tears of the Hedorine or an Eye of Shadow for class quests. Players of any class brave enough to take on the mantle of Scarab Lord will stop here to recover a chapter of Draconic for Dummies, and players trying to form Thunder Fury might pay a visit to Earthcaller Franzal in the furthest recesses of the gorge, who helps guide players on the path to smelting Elementium ore. You can find acidic pools, demonic shrines, and the bones of dragons scattered throughout here, and all signs point to the demons here being some of the remnants of those who fought for the Legion during the Battle of Mount Hyjal 4 years ago. But as you wander through this forsaken corner of Winterspring, you might come across one final detail, a small cave leading into the west. Pine trees poke up from beyond the ridge, a sign of life just beyond. The sacred summit of Hyjal, the place hinted at on all these maps, all these clues pointing upward to the great peaks of Kalimdor and the world tree that lies between them, it's just ahead. And yet, as you make your way inside, your journey is cut short by an elaborate gate blocking your path, and curiously, a green raid portal as well. This reveal was pretty surprising when I first discovered it years ago. One of the most integral zones in Warcraft history sealed off from the player. Since the early days of vanilla WoW, players have found ways of bypassing the gate and the invisible walls placed up above, from wall jumping to passing through the gate as a ghost, though in Classic most of those methods have been patched. If you do find a way beyond this dead end, maybe using a private server, what you'll discover is perhaps one of the most tranquil and complete secret locations in WoW history. No NPCs, no quests, not even a music track, just an uninhabited pine forest rising up into the mountains. This is the Mount Hyjal of classic WoW. The land has regrown much in the 4 years since the Legion's invasion, though you still pass through multiple demon-scarred plateaus, and a spot that can only be described as the largest crater on Azeroth. There are some magnificent views to take in as you continue to climb in elevation, the land opening up in ways rarely seen in other zones. So much space, so much potential content, locked behind a gate. But why? And what's the deal with that portal? My fellow WoW content creator Turbo Tarzan has a great video on this topic that you should check out, but the short answer is this. The devs weren't actually planning on opening up Hyjal as an open world zone, but instead we're going to structure it as a raid. I dug up an old GameSpy article that mentions this plan directly, with the interviewer getting a special look at the raid from developer Jeff Kaplan, who would later go on to direct Overwatch. Here's what the article has to say. "This is an ultra high level raid zone," Jeff said. "In fact, this is pretty much endgame content." He was running through an area that players will find filled with demons and dragons battling each other. "Warcraft 3 players will recognize this mountain," he said, "and the challenge here is to re-purify the Well of Eternity. In fact, as you travel through this area, you might even find a very familiar skeleton chained to a rock." And with that cryptic remark, my demonstration was done. There's a lot to unpack in just those few short sentences, but the main takeaway is that Hyjal was originally going to be a raid in which players would enter the zone and travel all the way to the top, battling demons and perhaps teaming up with the mythical dragons to prevent further damage to the world tree. Trekking through the open world Hyjal in Classic today, it seems plausible it could work as an outdoor type of raid with different threats and potentially different camps of enemies scattered throughout the map. There's even a copy of Onyxia's Black Dragon lair located in a canyon, perhaps alluding to the underground volcanic aspects of the corruption going on here. At the summit, we see something very similar to what Kaplan described, the bones of the demon lord Archimonde tangled in the world tree itself. A pretty dramatic reveal for those riding up through here, and this is a scene pretty commonly seen in exploration parts of the classic WoW community. Nordrassil has healed, the valley verdant and alive, and it is here where our journey truly comes to a close, complete with a literal roadblock where the path ends. The second Well of Eternity is sheltered beneath the tree and extends quite a ways down into the earth, and it's fascinating to think how a scrapped vanilla raid could have had us returning here so soon to defend this land once more. In the Burning Crusade expansion, we got to see a past version of the upper portion of Hyjal during a Caverns of Time raid, but it didn't have quite the scope or infamy of the open world template it was built upon. Cataclysm revamped most of the old world zones and finally opened up Mount Hyjal as a questing zone, though with a much different tone and overall experience than what we see here in vanilla. And I think most of us can agree that this weird, liminal version of Hyjal that Blizzard tried to lock away from us is one of its most iconic iterations. In keeping with the climbing theme of this video, I wanted to end by noting that the summit area is the highest traversable area in the game, with an average elevation of 1,600 mergles above sea level, and the highest peak of the summit sits at an impressive 1971, complete with a small flying machine parked on top. Nordrassil, fittingly named the Crown of the Heavens, extends about 100 units past that, making it the highest piece of the entire game world. For those interested, here are some of the other tallest points on Azeroth. It's really interesting to me to see how subtle most of the climb can feel until you find a view or flight path that totally shakes up your perception of how high up you are. once again demonstrating the ambitious world design of classic WoW, and undoubtedly one of the most complex geographic systems constructed within it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you learned something new today and appreciated this tour of northern Kalimdor, along with the details I thought fit well with the intrigue of Mount Hyjal. Who knows what could happen here in future versions of Classic, but regardless, I think Hyjal will first and foremost be remembered as one of the quintessential, out-of-bounds secret locations in the early versions of the game. A special thank you to my channel members who provide bonus support for these videos, and until next time, may the Force be with you.